just off air beforehand and just saying, actually, anxiety and depression, it's kind of one of those things that maybe I personally thought about the same thing.
Yeah, and I thought about doing them together, actually.
Yeah.
But they often do come together. And sometimes if people say, I'm depressed, then they might also be anxious and they might be talking about anxiety. But it is possible to have one without the other. And anxiety is really, really common, more common than depression.
Okay.
So I thought it'd be brilliant to just talk about that.
Okay, so explain to me what anxiety is then.
Well, anxiety is a complicated word for something that is really a normal response. So we're made to be anxious at times. So
Yep.
An example of that is if we walked along the road and there was a massive bear running towards us,
Yep.
we'd be right to get a bit scared and a bit
I'll give you that one.
anxious.
Yeah.
I think that would be acceptable. I don't
Okay.
know if that's going to happen
So
on the
anxiety
street.
isn't necessarily entirely negative
No,
thing.
exactly. So there's a thing called the fight or flight
I've heard of that
response.
one. Yeah.
So this is something that happens when we're faced with something dangerous, and naturally we respond in a way that means that we can run away if we need to. So actually it's a brilliant thing.
Yeah.
So I want to say that anxiety is actually really good,
Okay.
although it doesn't always feel like it.
Okay.
It is a natural and healthy response.
Okay. So when does it not become a natural and healthy response then?
Yeah. So if you think for a moment about how times when you might have been anxious, how you might have felt.
Yeah.
So possibly you might have started by feeling and thinking scared thoughts.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little bit worried about this situation. I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then you might have noticed things happening in your body. So, for example, your heart might race, your palms might sweat, you might start to shake and tremble. And so those physical feelings come along as a result of the anxious thoughts.
Okay.
And the feeling like we're in a threatening situation, that we don't know what to do in. And so that might mean then that we run away from the situation, or in the future we avoid the situation because we remember the anxiety from before.
Okay.
So you're with me so far?
Yeah, yeah.
So all those things might happen. And that can be okay. So for example, when we were talking before about exam stress, it's absolutely fine to be anxious. A little bit of an adrenaline.
It's going to sharpen you up a little
worried,
bit.
Exactly. But if it stops you coping or being able to go into the situations that you need to be able to go into.
Yeah.
So for example, if you are so anxious, panicked that you can't take your exam or you can't get up and go to school or to work or to university,
Yeah.
all those things that we need to do, then that's when it might be good to get a little bit of help.
Okay. So obviously you explained the symptoms of that. What sort of help could I actually get then if I wanted to deal with those?
Well, there are all sorts of things that you can do yourself. So it isn't always necessary to get professional help.
Okay.
And I guess knowing where the line is can be a difficult thing. So if you start to feel like maybe this anxiety is getting a bit too much, I'm scared about going back to school tomorrow, maybe I need to do something.
Yeah.
One thing that you can do is try and relax. Now,
Okay.
that probably sounds really obvious, like all of my advice. It's
Cool.
really obvious.
Yeah.
But actually, doing stuff like making sure that your body is relaxed can make a huge difference, because our minds and our bodies are so closely connected that a lot of what happens with anxiety is we get stuck in a spiral.
Okay.
So we get anxious and afraid. Then our heart rate starts to speed up and we start to worry even more. We think, oh my goodness, what's happening to me?
Yeah.
Am I going to collapse? Am I going to be able to make it through this situation? And so that makes us worry even more.
Right.
And then that increases our physical sensation.
Okay.
And so if you can take a moment out just to relax your muscles, to make sure that your jaw isn't tense, because we hold a lot of our anxiety in our jaws and in
Yeah.
our shoulders. Just doing that, just relaxing, can make a massive difference if you're not worried about looking ridiculous,
Yeah, sure.
wherever you are.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, does this then drop into subconscious? Because I mean, you obviously explained all of those things, but if you've got that situation that you're heading back into,
Yeah.
and you're not actually physically exhibiting any of those symptoms, but actually there's something about you. So obviously I've become anxious now, but on a subconscious level, I mean, does that kick in? Would that still be classed as anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we remember things really well, don't we?
Yeah.
And often, if we know we're going back into a situation where we've struggled before, we will be remembering that even before we notice that we're remembering it.
Yeah.
And so a good thing to do, if we know that we need to face that situation again, because that's life, isn't it? We can't always avoid things. is to do a thing called self-talk, which sounds a bit weird because...
Well, if you're looking weird, you can carry on.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're already looking weird, so now we start talking to ourselves. But all this means is that we're trying to recognise when we're having a negative thought, a thought that's like a worry thought. So, for example, I don't want to walk down the road again in case I see a bear.
Yeah.
So we're starting to worry about what happened the last time. And if we can identify those thoughts, even before they start, if we can think to ourselves, well, I know I'm going to start worrying. These are the things that are going to be really worrying me. Then we can start to challenge them. We can start to say, just because it happened before doesn't mean it'll happen again. Even if I get anxious, I'll be okay. I can get through it because I've got through it before. All of those things can be really helpful too. So yeah, self-talk. Excellent.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold that thought there. I'm going to play us a track, and then we'll come back through and we'll pick this up in just a moment. This is All Sons and Daughters here, and Oh, How I Need You. Back in a minute.
Plus music, plus community, plus life. This is radio giving Coventry more on 101.5. This is Radio Plus.
Okay, so if you joined us just the other side of the track there, we've got Ali in the studio with us, and we're actually continuing a series which we started a few weeks ago, which was called Keeping Health in Mind, wasn't it? So today we're looking at anxiety, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
And we've got some more coming up over the next 3 weeks. Do you want to remind us what they were?
So they are self-image and self-esteem, body image,
they are.
depression, and self-harm.
Very good. Did you write them down this time? No. That's very good, you know.
Still guessing.
It's very good. So, I mean, that's what's coming up over this series, and look at some of these. They're very serious topics, some of these as well. I mean, I was just saying earlier, some things actually I didn't necessarily come across in my childhood, and though I then met up with other family members later in life, particularly some of the self-harm stuff, something completely separate I'd never ever even heard of before, and there were these guys that were suffering with this stuff. So
and I think it's often only when you meet someone who's having that experience that you really start to understand it, or even want to understand it better.
For sure.
Yeah, when you hear people's story.
Indeed. So we're looking at anxiety today, and obviously you've given us that lovely picture of the bear coming down the road, and so anxiety isn't always bad.
No.
But actually, sometimes I think, particularly as Christians, we can beat ourselves up and say, "Why should I be anxious?
Yeah.
Is it wrong?"
Well, we do, and people often ask me this because in the Bible there's a lovely verse that says, don't be anxious about anything, but pray about everything, give it all to God.
Yeah.
And I don't want any biblical scholars on my back with what I'm about to say, but I wonder whether that's in there because God knows that we're worriers.
Yeah.
You know, that naturally we will get anxious about stuff. It's part of how we're made.
Yeah.
And that you don't need to feel like you're not relying on God if you're feeling anxious, and actually finding a way through, finding ways to cope with it and to start to feel better. Of all things that God gives us, they're gifts that he gives us.
They are.
Those practical tools. And so don't feel bad, because if you feel bad, then that just leads to more anxiety, and there's no need. God loves us as we are, and he wants us to be able to live life fully and be free of that stuff.
For sure. I mean, obviously recognise, I mean, God is very real in his approach to us and the way he deals with us.
Yeah.
And there's a number of other verses, you know, do not worry about tomorrow. And there's all those things. Yeah. They're there because we do worry.
Absolutely. And part of what is great about the Bible is that it is a practical toolkit, isn't it, for our lives?
Absolutely.
And we can find everything in there.
Indeed.
So don't feel like it's a negative thing if you read that and you're feeling anxious. See it as a positive.
I mean, the output of that is give that to God.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
he is able.
Yeah. And things will be changed by prayer. We know that.
Yeah.
And by doing those practical things and having good people around us.
Yeah. It does indeed. So sharing. I mean, obviously, if you're sitting there talking to yourself and looking weird because you've been relaxing, to share that with somebody, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Anxiety is one of those things that it feeds itself, and it can feed off our isolation. And sometimes what happens is we get so anxious we don't want to share it with people.
Yeah.
But I would say please do, because it always helps if you're feeling anxious to explain why, because often people can say, well, I don't think, maybe this would help, or maybe you don't need to be anxious. It's not as bad as you've built it up to be in your own mind, because we're brilliant at doing that, I think, at making things much worse than they are.
So give me a recap then. What can I do to combat this anxiety?
So you
or to
can
move forwards with it.
relax is really important,
Yeah.
even if it feels counterintuitive. So
Yeah.
how on earth can I relax my body if it's so tense and my heart's racing?
Yeah.
But it really will help. And know also that often people think that anxiety just goes up on a can't say it.
Trajectory or
Yeah, that's the
projectory? Yeah, that
one.
one.
yeah, that one. And it will just keep getting worse and worse
Yeah.
until eventually they're going to explode, or something terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want to belittle that, because it can be a really terrifying experience,
Mm-hmm.
especially if people start to panic, have panic attacks, those kinds of things, can't catch their breath. Of course, it is frightening. But actually, what happens with anxiety is that it builds to a peak and then it will drop off again.
Yeah.
And so just bear in mind and believe that will happen, that it won't keep on getting worse and escalating. It will start to drop off and you will start to feel better anyway, naturally.
Very good.
Self-talk we talked about.
Yeah.
So identifying those worry thoughts, the things that are going to maintain our anxiety, and trying to think of an opposite to them, trying to think of a way that we can talk ourselves down from it. And then also sometimes just thinking about something else, distraction, which is simple and obvious, but so good. So chatting to a friend, reading a book, doing a puzzle, going out for a walk, ways that we can turn our mind to something different until the anxiety has come down.
Now, one of the things that struck with me, because I love listening to this stuff, and you're always looking for new ways to cope with things yourself.
Yeah.
When we were talking about exam stress, one of the things I think you said was thinking about one thing only. Because, I mean, you were saying women are multitaskers. I'm one of the weird men that multitasks. And I can be doing 20 things at any one time.
I don't believe you.
You got to do it. I'll tell you, ask my wife. We've got role reversal in our house. But that was a really interesting thing for me to think. Actually, yes, I could clear my mind and focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And again, is that a good tip for anxiety? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. As long as the one thing isn't the
thing that
you're worried about.
Yeah.
But if you can focus on something else that you need to do, or focus on a hobby.
Yeah.
Something that's going to take a lot of concentration.
Yes.
Like doing a puzzle, or like knitting, or the things that you can do with your hands and that involve your brain as well. Then I think that can be really good. Yeah.
Very good.
To try and bring the focus onto something else that isn't the thing that's making you anxious.
Grand. Well, look, we're racing towards 7 o'clock this evening. It's fantastic to have you here. We're going to be back next week. We're going to be doing body image and self-esteem next week. Have you got any guests with us for that?
Yes, I have Heather Reid, who is an occupational therapist here in Coventry. So she'll be coming in with me to talk about it.
Brilliant.